Welcome to the Athletic Fantasy Football Cheat Sheet brought to you by Jock Market. The final weekend of 2020 fantasy football draft season is upon us, and we are here to help you. I'm Derek Van Riper, joined today by Jake Seeley, Brandon Funston, and Michael Beller. Later on in the show, Ed Mallion drops by to share some of his Brits picks for the upcoming season. Before we get started, a quick thank you to Jock Market for sponsoring the show. Jock Market is where daily fantasy sports becomes a stock exchange. Buy and sell shares of players with other users in real time. Make money every hour, every minute, every second of every game. Check them out. Golf is live right now. NBA is live right now. And the NFL begins with the start of Week 1, so download the Jock Market app in the App Store. The Android app is coming soon, and get familiar with it. Be ready to make some money as fantasy football season gets underway. Gentlemen, let's get right to it. It's a big weekend for drafts. I want to ask you, who is the player you are currently avoiding in the top 25 overall? It's important to avoid pitfalls in those early rounds. Jakey, let's start with you.
Let's start with me. Let's start with, I'm not going to pick one player. I'm going to take every wide receiver in the first two rounds that's not named Michael Thomas and Devontae Adams, just because, look, we've seen the ADP, we've seen the reports, we've seen everything out there, what happens when you don't take a running back in the first two rounds, let alone if you're taking wide receivers like Julio, and then do you take Godwin, or do you put DeAndre Hopkins in this conversation? And my point is, why try to give yourself that headache? Why try to decide Julio? Why try to decide if Hopkins is going to have an amazing season with the Arizona Cardinals? Go take yourself a running back or a second running back, and then guess what? In round 3, you just get to decide from Godwin and Allen Robinson and Kenny Golladay, and you get guys that are on their heels anyway. So it just seems like a decision I'm not making and seems kind of pointless to make for everybody out there. So unless your name is Michael Thomas or Devontae Adams, you're not getting drafted by me.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, the shape of the player pool this year, very top-heavy at running back. That also leads me to stay away from a lot of those non-Thomas and non-Adams receivers early on as well. How about you, Brandon? I bet you can narrow it down to one player you're avoiding in the top 25.
I can, and I will help Jake out by picking one of those receivers he's not going to draft. Specifically, that is Chris Godwin. Look, he was a breakout sensation last year. The situation's changed. Jameis Winston's out, Tom Brady's in. Jameis Winston pass attempts and Tom Brady pass attempts are not created equal. We know Brady works that short field a little bit more. He targeted James White almost 100 times last year. You add in Rob Gronkowski to the equation. You add in a better defense. This might be a team that where Jameis Winston in garbage time, because they were chasing the scoreboard, was just chucking it downfield like crazy. Interceptions be damned. It could be a lot more conservative environment. And so buying in Chris Godwin at wide receiver 6 for me is tough, because any number of new influences could change the equation for Godwin a lot based on what he was last year.
Tons of talent there and an explosive offense, but yeah, lots of competition for touches and a running back situation that got a lot better with the late addition of Leonard Fournette. Let's go to you, Beller. How about a running back that you're staying away from inside the top 25 overall this draft season?
Yeah, I'll throw a running back into the discussion, and I'm with Jake. I do want to go running back wherever possible, and it is pretty possible almost across the board no matter what your draft slot is, but one guy who's probably not going to be in that mix for me is Austin Ekeler. And I love the player. I was all over him last year. I had him in a lot of spots last year, but in L.A. as Phillip Rivers is gone, Tyrod Taylor is in. I think Tyrod Taylor has been a little unfairly maligned during his career, but there is no doubting that Phillip Rivers was Austin Ekeler's best friend last season. 108 targets, caught 92 of them for 993 receiving yards. And sure, he can make it up with a little bit more rushing volume this season with Melvin Gordon gone, but I don't want Austin Ekeler making it up with rushing volume. I want him as that 90-catch, 100-target guy, a guy who can push 1,000 receiving yards, and I'm just not sure that's going to be in the cards for him. Phillip Rivers has always been a guy who loves throwing the ball to his running backs, and Tyrod Taylor probably not going to do it at that same level. So when I look at that ADP on Austin Ekeler, it's pretty easy for me to go to Josh Jacobs or Devontae Adams or Aaron Jones, right? Jake or Nick Chubb, all guys being selected in that same range. I would rather have any of them than Austin Ekeler.
Don't pull me into that Aaron Jones nonsense. I would take Austin Ekeler over half those guys.
I know.
Ekeler worries me too for a lot of the same reasons. I'm actually willing to pivot and actually go to the tight end position before I draft Austin Ekeler at that 1-2 turn. I'd go Travis Kelce or George Kittle over him too, which probably puts me on an island this draft season. Let's talk about old, boring veterans because there are some available at a discount that could actually help you win your league this season. Let's kick it off with you, Brandon. Who's the one old, boring veteran that you really like at a discount this draft season?
I keep bringing up Mark Ingram, and I still can't believe he's a running back you can get in the mid-20s at the position. He was number 8 last year, and it wasn't on a major workload, and so people that worry about J.K. Dobbins, you know what? J.K. Dobbins can basically take over Gus Edwards' role and get around 150 touches, maybe a little bit more. And if they reduce Lamar Jackson's rush load as well, there is plenty of room for Mark Ingram to get the 228 touches he had last year. And you can say, okay, 15 touchdowns, there's going to be some regression, but Baltimore was the leading team in getting into the red zone week in and week out, and so there's still high upside in the touchdown department. I just think this is a great, highly efficient offense, especially for the running back position. And if you want to factor in some regression, that's fine, but call it mid-teens level at the running back position and not mid-20s. I just don't get that at all.
Yeah, as much as I like J.K. Dobbins as a talent, part of my reservations about going after him in redraft leagues is the presence of Mark Ingram. So I'm right there with you. He is one of those older players who I still have some faith in. Bello, let's kick it over to you. An old, boring veteran that you really like at a discount this season.
I'm going to go to Golden Tate here, you guys. One of the most unfairly dogged guys every single year. Maybe dogged isn't quite the right word, but he never seems to get the appreciation that he deserves. Last year in just 11 games, 49 catches, 676 yards, and 6 touchdowns. We're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4.5 catches, 63, 64 yards, and half a touchdown per game. That's always going to play. And I will readily admit right up front that part of that had to do with Sterling Shepard being a little bit banged up, Evan Ingram a little bit banged up, but I'm not sure there is one for sure number one guy in this Giants offense. I think Golden Tate can come back and reprise the role that he had in this passing game a season ago. We all expect a little bit of growth, at least from Daniel Jones this year. Golden Tate gets to stay home in the slot where he has always done his best work. I'm not asking him to be, wide receiver 25. All I'm asking him to be is, maybe wide receiver 35 or 40, and all his ADP asks you to do is draft him at wide receiver, 55. This is an easy profit for me on draft day. I've got a ton of Golden Tate already. I've got a few more drafts coming up. He will be on my radar big time in those ones as well.
Yeah, especially in full PPR leagues, I think he makes a lot of sense at that price. Even in half PPR format, seems a little bit undervalued as well. Jake disagrees, but I don't really want to hear why he disagrees. I want an old, boring veteran that Jake actually likes. Jake doesn't like many things, so when Jake likes something or someone, I'm always curious to know more about that thing or about that person or player.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I don't like Mark Ingram inside the top 20. I don't like Golden Tate because Sterling Shepard is the number one. So nope and nope.
We'll see.
I'll give you the quarterback who last year, by the way, was number 4 in fantasy points per game because he missed a few games. So if you take out the one where he got hurt, he only scored 20-plus points in all but 2 games, including a 40-point game, which is what he does and wins games for you. And the other 2 games where he didn't score 40, he still scored about a 12 points, so he never really left you hanging completely either. Oh, and that just happens to be Drew Brees, who just added Emmanuel Sanders, who I don't like for fantasy purposes because we never trust the second wide receiver for the Saints. But we do trust Drew Brees, and we do trust his arm. Again, 20 points per game last year, even if you include the game where he got hurt, 4th overall. And people don't want Drew Brees. I just did a draft. We just did the CBS telethon. I got him in the 11th round. Like, this has become ridiculous at this point.
Age discrimination is popular in the fantasy football community. And, yeah, I'm right there with you on Brees. He gets lumped in with a bunch of other quarterbacks who I don't think bring quite the same ceiling because their offenses simply aren't as good as the Saints' offense should be here in 2020. Let's move on to training camp or practice report narratives that have bubbled up over the past few weeks that you actually believe in. It's been a weird draft season, of course, with no preseason games, but what coach speak, what storylines are you clinging to the most? Beller, I know you've got a local one that you're jumping onto right now, so what's it going to be this year for you?
Indeed I am. Not going to go far from home on this one. This one actually just came out earlier this week, too. Matt Nagy saying that Anthony Miller has been the best player in Bears training camp. Now, best player, I bet Allen Robinson is still probably the best player on that offense and probably a lot of good players on that defense who are really, quote, the best player. But The point of this is that Anthony Miller is having a strong camp and that the Bears are expecting a lot from him in this 2020 season. And I am right there with Matt Nagy and the Bears Brain Trust. This is a guy who dealt with shoulder injuries for the balance of his career to this point. But we finally saw him get past those shoulder injuries in the back half of last season, had a 5-game run where in 4 of them he had at least 6 grabs, 2 100-yard games, 2 touchdowns in that stretch. And you look at that offense, you're going to see a whole lot of Allen Robinson, a whole lot of Anthony Miller, and really not too much else in the passing game. You can dog the quarterbacks all you want, but guess what? Mitch Trubisky, pretty bad last year. Chase Daniel, when he filled in, pretty bad last year. The quarterback play in Chicago can't get any worse than it was in 2019. I think we see an easy 110, 115, maybe 120 targets for Anthony Miller, and we're starting to see what he can do when he stays healthy. Wide receiver 53 by ADP since the middle of August. That is, again, easy profit. I want Anthony Miller on all my teams.
I'm a little surprised that a lifelong Bears fan approaching age 36 doesn't think quarterback play can get worse at any given time in Chicago.
Not a bad
You
point.
should know better by now. You really
If
should.
that was pretty bad in Chicago last year, I want to know what's really bad in Michael's mind.
Steve Stenstrom, Moses Moreno, something like that.
He could reel him off for 20 minutes if we let him. Let's go to Jake. Jake, which training camp narrative are you clinging on to the most this draft season?
See, I don't always hate everything. I love the Anthony Miller call because my bold prediction is that he and Allen Robinson are both top 20. So I like some things. But mine is going to be a little bit negative, but you have to be patient. It's the DeAndre Swift. So DeAndre Swift, initially, he's another bold prediction I had where he was going to be an RB1 this year. And that was bold. Like, obviously, the odds of that happening were slimmer than the realistic situation is that he was going to split initially. But added to that, the report that we're buying into is that he was missing over a week. He was on the sidelines, something good with his legs. We never really found out what the true issue was, but he's going to split week 1 and likely be behind Kerryon Johnson for week 1. I believe it. I do believe that Kerryon's the guy for now, despite he has a knee brace on. But if you talk about last year, I keep comparing Miles Sanders to him and saying we could see DeAndre Swift in that role by week 5, 6, 7. The only problem for everybody out there for drafting, unlike Miles Sanders, where you got him in the 7th and 8th round, and you can potentially buy low if somebody got frustrated. If somebody drafts DeAndre Swift, you're going to have to still pay 5th, 6th round, and the person who buys that is not going to probably want to give him up in a trade for buying low. So you either sit, wait, be patient, or just avoid him altogether.
Yeah, it takes a special kind of roster construction to hold on to a player that you draft that early and not really have a chance to lock him into your lineup until maybe the second month of the season if that usage plays out that way for DeAndre Swift. Funston, how about you? A training camp narrative or practice report storyline that you believe in the most this draft season?
Yeah, I bought in right away on the idea that Josh Jacobs would get a significant bump in the passing game. Mike Mayock talked about wanting to do that earlier this summer. Josh Jacobs has come out and said he wants to get 60 catches. He only had 20 last year. I think reasonable expectation is that he can double that number and get into the 40s. I expect that to happen. And I know they have guys there in Jalen Richard, Lynn Bowden, Theo Riddick. But one thing I always say is if you have a skilled featured guy in the passing game, you're not tipping your hand when you have them on the field in passing situations where it's still realistically possible that you could run the ball. When you put Theo Riddick, Lynn Bowden, Jalen Richard out there, you're telling the defense that you're going to throw the ball most likely. And so I think it makes sense. If you watch film from Alabama of Josh Jacobs in the passing game, he's great at it. And if you're throwing the ball into the flat, do you want the ball in Josh Jacobs' hands or Jalen Richard's hands? So to me, it just makes too much sense that you leave him on there if they feel comfortable with him in the passing game, to the pass pro and all that. And I think they do, and I think we'll see that ramped up big time.
Yeah, I like the possibility of Josh Jacobs really scaling up that workload in the passing game.
You need to call him out.
Could make him an easy first rounder.
You're calling
in
me out?
2020.
Yeah, you said you're buying the 60, and then you hedged yourself by saying 40. If you're buying it, tell me you're buying the 60.
I'm buying 50. I'm splitting the difference.
While Brandon and Jake work that out backstage, I'd like to say thank you for watching the Athletic Fantasy Football Cheat Sheet, sponsored by Jock Market. If you're looking for some last-minute draft prep help, you can get 40% off a subscription to The Athletic at theathletic.com/cheat sheet. Get Jake's rankings and projections, sleepers, strategy articles, everything you need to help dominate your leagues this season. And be sure to check out our fantasy football podcast as well, the Athletic Fantasy Football Podcast and Fantasy Football in 15, anywhere you listen to podcasts. For Michael Beller, Jake Seeley, and Brandon Funston, I'm Derek Van Riper. Thanks for watching.